Jim and Will. What have they been watching lately? They're husky, hairy, huggable homos. Movie Bears Podcast.
Hello all and welcome to the Movie Bears Podcast. I'm Brad Harris, and each week I'm joined by some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos and friends to review films either current or classic. And this week we've got a very current film coming at you, Black Widow, the new Marvel film starring Scarlet Johansson, David Harbour, so many people. Florence Pugh is finally here. We get to talk about it. There's a lot of excitement around that, I think. And it's a stacked show tonight, ladies and gentlemen. We have a full house. We have two very special guests who are joining us for this review. I will introduce them in just a second. We'll keep their identities secret, unless, of course, you're watching live and you see their names and their faces right on the screen. But whatever. Jim Pugliafico, let's introduce you first, sweetheart. How are you doing? Welcome.
I'm doing good, thanks. And good to be on here with some friends we haven't seen in a while, see their faces. This is maybe akin to getting back into the movie theater again, and just feels good to be around people a little bit again. And so, it's a big movie we're going to talk about. So yeah, let's do it. I'm excited.
I'm excited that you're excited. Welcome. Glad to have you here. William Lindis is here as well. It wouldn't be a show without Will. How are you, friend?
I am doing very good, comrade. How are you doing?
Oh, no. Are we going to get in trouble for mocking accents? I hope not.
No.
Doesn't. Why shouldn't we? Yeah.
No, I'm so excited to be here. You're right. This is one that I think a lot of people have been waiting for quite some time. So, we've been built up with anticipation. What's it going to be like? What's going to happen? So I'm glad that we finally get to have seen it and now share our experiences with it. So this is going to be a blast.
Agreed. And blast, is that in reference to all the explosions in this film? Maybe it was incidental. I don't know.
Yeah, let's say that it was intentional. I very, very purposefully planned that entire sentence. Yeah.
I'm sure you did. Well, welcome, Will. Glad to have you here. Our next guest needs no introduction. Well, actually, he kind of does. Adrian Charlie from the Green Screen of Death podcast is here with us. Adrian, we haven't seen you since our 400th episode, 8 episodes ago. How the hell are you, friend?
Hey, I'm doing really well. It's an honor to be here with y'all, and just really excited to be podcasting and also talking about a movie I saw in a theater. Like, that's something I don't get to do every day. So really happy, and thanks for the invite, fellas.
So glad to have you here, Adrian. Definitely looking forward to hearing your extended thoughts. I saw some of them on Facebook, but then when I knew you were going to be on the show, I was like, hard stop, don't read more, don't spoil the surprise. So can't wait to hear what you have to say. We've got another special guest who was also with us for our 400th episode, although he and Adrian did not officially cross paths and actually meet. So this is like a first-time thing happening right here. Steve Mowry from the Comic Book Bears podcast. How the hell are you?
Good. Hello. And very nice to meet you, Adrian. But thank you so much for having me on for today's show. As always, it's in the name, Comic Book Bears. I am a huge comic book movie buff as well. And I have been anticipating this movie since, let's see, when was it first announced? 2018. And we're a year away from when it was supposed to premiere. So it was really exciting to actually finally see this in the theater as well. And I did actually see it in 3D because I was feeling nostalgic and needed to have some reason to put on those stupid glasses.
3D.
Again.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's no need to see it in 3D, but it felt good to be able to get the glasses on and be in a theater.
We need to talk about that too. Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Well, Steve, so glad to have you with us. I think we're going to see your cohort when we review Suicide Squad in a little while. Bill Z, who's also in the chat, by the way. Hey, Bill. He says Steve is the Yelena to my Natasha. Take good care of him tonight. We will take very good care of him, Bill. When you loan out your Steve to somebody, I understand wanting to make sure he's treated nicely. We'll make sure he has a good time and that he's home by curfew, Daddy. How about that?
Daddy.
Now, here's the thing
Don't make
that
boss angry.
Here's the thing that I'm wondering if it's going to happen, and this is a spy reference, not a reference to any particular scene, any particular movie. But I wonder if it like halfway through the interview, if Steve's just going to like pull off a mask and then Bill's going to be underneath there. That could be kind of rad, huh?
Maybe.
I wouldn't say it won't happen.
Oh my God, you guys! Bill Harris is in the house too, from Green Screen to Death podcast. He says, "Do whatever you want to Adrian. I could care less." So,
Don't threaten me with a good time.
Bill's not in a very charitable mood. I think he's still smarting from the loss this past weekend.
oh no, don't go there.
We won't go there, but
No. We don't want to make our Bill sad.
I almost feel like since we got the Bills on the sidelines, like maybe I, as a adjacent Bill, should also be kind of taking a back seat on this one. Like, I'm not, but
You're Bill adjacent. You know,
I'm Bill
so
adjacent. Yeah.
you just. So wait, does this mean that we need to have the two Bills on for Suicide Squad? I feel like
I think that might be it. And
We
I
might
will,
have
I
double
will, I will change my. Even though I'm, I am one of those like, don't call me Bill, my name is Will kind of guys. I will change my thing to Bill for that one, just so that we have like
Oh goodness,
The Bill gang.
Wall to wall bills.
Bill Harris sees just about everything. And I know he's going to see this movie. I know he's going to see it. Yeah.
For sure. Well, Bill Z and Bill H, thanks for loaning us your Steves and Adrians. We've got a big conversation, and I know we're all jonesing to get into it. So let me just say this up front to anyone who is listening live or through the magic of digital tape delay through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, however you access your podcasts. Typically, we review a film, we give our initial thoughts, spoiler-free for the first 20 minutes, and kind of go down the line person by person. Hard stop, we are not doing that this time. We got 5 people here. It's a lot to talk about. So what we're going to do is when we jump into our movie review, which is happening in like 30 seconds, Will is going to give us an introduction. Thank you in advance, Will. And then all spoilers are going to officially be fair game. So if you haven't seen Black Widow yet and you value your innocence, that is going to be your cue to go ahead and step away so that you do not get spoiled. Don't worry. We will ramble for a few moments to give you an opportunity to do that. Just know, no holds barred with spoilers. Is
Probably be spoiling other MCU movies as well.
I'm sure we'll probably spoil any and every MCU movie, especially the last couple Avengers movies, because you know this film kind of plays a
I'm going to intentionally spoil 4 different Marvel properties today, so I don't know what they are yet, but I'm going to fucking make it happen.
There you go. All right, so all of that said, Jim, Will, Steve, Adrian, are you ready to talk Black Widow?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, then let's get in our Quinjet and head for the skies. Here we go. Our discussion of Black Widow. All right, so we are going to talk about this movie with spoilers right from the get-go. This is your chance. Step away if you need to. Awkward ramble. Will, while people are stepping away if they need to, give us the basic setup of this film, if you don't mind. What are we getting ourselves into?
Absolutely. So Black Widow is the latest sort of film from Marvel Studios, part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It was originally slated to be the kickoff for Phase 4, sort of after Phase 3 ended with Infinity War, Endgame, and then the last Spider-Man movie that came out. This was supposed to be the kickoff, but then a little pandemic happened, and it got pushed back and behind a couple of other Phase 4 properties, WandaVision, Falcon and Winter Soldier, Loki, Black Widow. But still, this is the first theatrical outing, and it is sort of a prequel, or at least sort of a midquel. It stars Natasha Romanoff, Black Widow, Scarlett Johansson, in that time period between the Civil War film, when she and several of the other Avengers, things had disbanded and they were on the run, and Infinity War, where, Thanos-y things happen. And this film really focuses on Natasha's backstory coming back to haunt her. She's always talked in the movies about how she has some red in her ledgers, and here we get to find out what that truly means, from an encounter with a pseudo a family that's put together by the Russian government, all of the Americans in her youth, to the background behind the actual Red Room itself, where she was molded into the killer that she would become. This movie follows just what it takes for someone to deal with the fact that they've done horrendous things in their past, while also making amends with the people that they maybe still care about from their past, that they haven't kept those connections up with. So that's the very, very, very broad description of it. We'll talk about what all of those individual things mean, but this is a spy thriller. This is a spy thriller starring Scarlett Johansson. That's what you need to know.
All right. Well, thank you for that very excellent introduction to the film. As I mentioned, we're going to totally tackle this thing with spoilers flying right from the get-go for pretty much the whole movie, all MCU movies. Maybe even MCU TV shows could come into the discussion at some point. So just be aware of that and act appropriately. Oh my gosh, Tony G is here, fellas. The very handsome Tony G says, hello, Bears. Mm-hmm. Hey, Tony. Good to have you with us. Welcome. All right. Speaking of handsome men, it seems like the natural place to start is David Harbour with a beard, showing off his muscles and some belly punch.
Yeah, that was amazing. Like me and Brad, we kind of fangirled in the DMs over just David Harbour, just a little bit. When he showed up in the I don't know if that was in the trailers. I don't remember it, but yeah, as Sarah and I were watching that sequence play out, I think both of our hearts were just so elevated, and it was a beautiful scene. David Harbour is a beautiful man, and I didn't really get it before in Stranger Things, but in that particular sequence, I was like, okay, I get it now.
Isn't it in Stranger Things where we see him in his underwear? Where did we see him?
Yes.
Yes. So yeah,
the first time we're introduced to him.
Yeah, he's in his underwear. Then he puts on a pair of jeans. I remember, because I have a thing for denim, and he's out on his porch. He's smoking. I'll forgive that, but he's shirtless in his jeans, and we'll just say,
yeah, wow.
Brad,
pretty hot.
I remember because I have a thing for jeans, or I remember because I watched that on repeat 18 times. Which one is it?
Little column A, little column B.
I don't know.
But Steve, you were fanning yourself as the topic of David Harbour came up. Did he trip your trigger as well?
All of them, and you know what? I was first really introduced to him in that Stranger Things scene, and yeah, he's just been getting better and better as the years have gone on, and it really hasn't been that many years, but yeah, and this, unfortunately, interestingly enough, we did get a couple more glimpses of David Harbour in the preview that seemed to have been excised from the movie. Yeah. Mostly him flexing in front of a mirror, but you know what? I still have those memories while watching this. So it was just the whole picture, the whole thing together was.
Would have been nice if they swapped that. If they had to take that scene out, they swapped it out for like a prison shower scene. That would have been even better, but they didn't do that.
I mean, don't threaten me with a good time. Come on.
Right.
And it's too bad too, because Adrian, you mentioned that whole scene was great, and I agree with you. When the hairy muscle bear dude like sat down to arm wrestle with him, I was like, oh. And then I saw another guy in the background, and I'm like, oh. And Jim and Kevin are looking at me like, how many times are you gonna go, oh? But just so many hot dudes in that scene. I was a little sad when the hottest of the guys got his wrist broken. Got his wrist broken. That was a little sad.
Yeah.
It was probably his jerk off hands. I'm sure he has prison buddies to help him, maybe in his time of need. If not, I volunteer.
Wow.
Oh my gosh. It's interesting. I mean, David Harbour's great in this. He plays the Red Guardian or the Crimson Dynamo, depending on if you want to make that joke. The movie certainly does. But his role here is to sort of serve as when Black Widow was young, she was placed in this family with another Black Widow, Yelena, and a mother and a father figure. The father figure being played by David Harbour, a Russian super soldier who wants to be on the front lines doing big, glorious things, and instead was placed in this secret spy mission in Ohio. And what was really interesting about this is, of course, it's a fun role with like a lot of like goofy comedy as like a character is trying to recapture his past and all of that, while also connecting to these surrogate daughter characters as they have kind of evolved into the adults that they've become. But we also get to see the evolution of David Harbour as he's actually playing a dad type character here. And I was having a conversation with my I have a comic book / gaming group that I hang out with, and we were of course talking Black Widow, because why wouldn't we? And we were trying to think if there's anybody right now who would better serve as the internet's dad than David Harbour, and we couldn't come up with anyone. Like, he is just that well beloved and just sort of has that role of like, I don't think David Harbour at this point, God forbid, please don't put out any stupid tweets, David Harbour, but I don't think at this point, like, he can't do any wrong. Like, he's kind of in like Keanu territory or something like that in just terms of like universally beloved.
I agree. And did you guys? You mentioned the whole surrogate family thing, and the movie opens with an extended scene of them being in their incognito in this family setting in Ohio, right? I think it was.
It was Ohio.
Mike Levins, Magic Mike himself, says Ohio, yay! So there you go, babe.
Yeah,
Ohio.
Now, everybody else on this podcast, and maybe even in the theater, probably knew exactly what was up with this family. But maybe because I don't know, I'm not a comic reader, so I didn't know that was the kind of the origin of Natasha and Yelena, and the rest of them. But so for me, it was a little disorienting. It was good. I really enjoyed that part of it, that scene. I thought that was a great setup scene, but mostly for me because it kind of kept me off balance. Like, what is going on here? Okay, well, one of these girls must be, Natasha. But I didn't know, when the dad came home and said, okay, we got to go in an hour, or, things are going to get crazy in an hour. I didn't know if this was a Tomorrow War kind of situation, or, what was going on. So it was really interesting. Did you guys know? Did you guys know what that setup was, how that was going to play out? Like, because you had read comics or something?
I would jump in here and say, not necessarily because of the comics, but if you were a fan of a recent dramatic series that won all the awards several years ago, The Americans, set up basically the same type of premise, where you had an embedded Russian spy family unit, the parents as well as the kids, who went about their lives being as American as apple pie, but secretly looking to sabotage and
Yeah,
seems to be a strange tentacle.
Yes.
Anyway, it's a sabotage
The new
the United
kitten.
States in some way. Oh,
Yeah, I didn't see the Americans, but when during that whole setup scene did you know it was like that they were spies? Like, when did it become apparent? Because to me, I didn't even know until they kind of landed in Cuba, I think it was, or whatever, right? Where it was becoming apparent what was really going on. Because the Americans was not about this particular set of characters, right? It was totally something else. Yeah.
It wasn't. I think where I clocked it was, and Steve, you're absolutely right. Like the comic book background on this, on Black Widow is very different than this. So anyone that came in with like comic book knowledge, it was more like knowing what the Red Room was and some of that. But like in the comics, she's like, I don't know, she's like from the 20s and like she ages super slowly and like just like, you know, comic book bullshit. I love comic book bullshit, but you know what I mean. No, for me, the thing that I clocked was the young actress that they got to play little Yelena looked so much like Florence Pugh. Like they cast someone really good for that. And then once we also saw David Harbour and Rachel Weisz there, I was able to very quickly just do the calculus of like, okay, this one has to be Natasha. This has to be younger. Why would these 4 Russian spies be in Ohio? Oh, it must be an American's thing. So it was really that young actress that like was the cornerstone for it for me.
Yeah. And then
I just sat there and watched and was entertained without a lot of pre-knowledge.
Yeah. Like I said, that scene did really work for me because I think, you know, when the reveal was made, it was, you know, it was kind of revelatory for me anyway.
Yeah, I had a similar experience to Jim because I didn't really know much about this going in. And I was really disoriented when they landed in Cuba. I was like, wait, why isn't he behaving like an actual father? Because you know, his girls got taken away and he didn't look too concerned. And I was like, wait, what's going on here? And I thought that was really effective. That I think they accomplished the goal of tricking the audience like us who are like, oh yeah, they're a family. Yeah, they're really, that's really their kids. They're really a couple. And then they pull the carpet out from under you. And I'm a very gullible person when I watch movies. So that's my fault.
I think that helps. I think that really helps to, you know, to appreciate and enjoy movies a little bit more, is to kind of let your guard down a little bit and not, you know, especially like, you know, mysteries and horror movies. Like, oh, he's the monster. No, she's the killer, you know, whatever. I try not to let myself get too far down that road because it can you could take yourself out of a movie that way.
Very easily. Yeah.
And Adrian, I really do like what you said about the disorientation and sort of the confusion there. And I think that really is mirrored very well with the 2 young actresses who we've seen as the children up to this point. We know Natasha, young Natasha, knows a little bit more than young Yelena does, but just the confusion and you know, fear that they have when, you know, their father and mother are taken away and then they're also taken away and separated. You know, just that kind of disorientation that we feel, they're also feeling. So we're kind of along for that very confusing and unfortunately very distressing ride that happens in the opening credits.
And it sets up what is probably one of the most like tragic and heartbreaking moments of probably any Marvel movie is in that montage, because we've heard from, you know, granted snippets and bits in here and there as Black Widow is talking about some of her past. We know the psychological and physical torture that awaited for her once she got off that plane. She's told us about it, and we know the impact that it's had on her. And we also know that her younger sister Yelena is going to be subjected to those very same things. So even though they talk about it later on, but even though we don't spend time in that actual like terrible period in the middle, just that montage there just broke my heart. Like, which was interesting feeling for the opening of a new Marvel movie, but it was effective.
Was it effective for everybody? I don't know. I mean, we get the slow rock song, opening credit
sounds like
montage.
Teen
Not the song.
Sounds
Not
like
the
Teen
song.
Spirit, but
Here we are now.
which I appreciated. It made me feel nostalgic for the early '90s, but I think it really just kind of gave you this. Is this a Marvel movie? Am I going to be excited? Is this going to be something that's really going to make me want to enjoy what I'm seeing, or is this, going to be 2 hours and 15 minutes of just, young girls being trafficked and tortured?
Right.
Yeah.
And they gloss past.
This isn't an This isn't an A24 movie, so there's probably no danger of that. But I see the fear. I see.
Yeah.
They were being tortured
effective.
and turned into the synchronized murder team at the end, right? Where they had that scene where they're in this red room thing and they're like doing these synchronized moves. I'm like, what is this like? This is like the Solid Gold Dancers all over again. I don't know. That was the weirdest thing. I don't know why they were doing that.
But with guns.
With guns and like doing Charlie's Angels poses, and it was weird.
And better hair.
Yeah, much better.
Yeah.
So we were talking about the family thing, and I wanted to come back to that for a second because we get a lot of the family set up at the beginning. Yes, we get the montage of what happens to them. Obviously, a ton happens to Yelena and Natasha by the time everyone comes back together again as a family. They break Daddy Red Guardian out of prison. They meet back up with the mom who's like doing her own thing with pigs on a ranch. It doesn't sound as raunchy as I made it sound.
Right.
But they come back together and they have this scene around the table while they're eating, while they're drinking copious amounts of alcohol. Did you get that family feeling in that scene? Like, was it believable for you that like they maybe still held some attachments?
Oh, I definitely did. For me, that was one of the best scenes in the movie, I thought, when they were all together. And you got the sense that while it may not have felt, it did feel like a family in some ways. Obviously, they weren't a quote real family, but they had spent time together. They were in a similar they were in the same situation all together. And so they were kind of sharing this experience. So I just loved the interplay in that scene between all the actors. I thought it was a really well-written thing in between, a bunch of action stuff, basically. And there was a lot of good character work in those 10 or 15 minutes that we spent with them once they arrived at the farmhouse until somebody showed up. I think it was who showed up? Was it the red room?
It was the Red Room people.
Yeah, the Red Room team. Yeah.
Taskmaster.
Taskmaster and the gang, the squad.
Yeah, Taskmaster.
There is a wonderful moment in that section right after where they're around the table, and it's between Melina and Natasha, where they're looking at the photo album, and Natasha, was saying, I remember when we took all these photos, we had, all the holidays in one afternoon. We just dressed up. It was all a play. It was all fake. But I loved every minute of it. And that to me is something I've held on to. And even Melina, because she's kept the photo album. They're all fake, but they're of real people and they did have some real relationship. I think that's kind of, that was another, moment that just really kind of solidified that there is something more there.
They had come to represent like a real photo album and real moments, even though they were maybe staged at the time. The passage of time now has caused these characters to look back on them as their life and their family, which it was.
Yeah. A moment of peace.
They experienced something pretty dramatic and traumatic together in a very formative part in all of their lives. After this, every single one of them went on to do something else that was all spawned from that moment. But the one thing that I love so much about a good movie is when it brings together all of the different elements to convey its theme. Here they're using the same blocking on the table as they were using when they were in the childhood scene at the beginning. The characters are sitting in the same spot as they were when they sat down, even though they only sat down for a moment, the exact same spot. Even as they're like bickering, the script is working with that blocking as they're sort of like going back and forth. You see all of them reverting to sort of like their old roles. Even, like hardened killer Yelena, who, played by the just radiant Florence Pugh, who should be in every movie because she's the best. I noticed that she started like slouching down quite a bit and just sort of like reverting back to like what it is to be like the youngest and smallest at the table. And of course, that's accentuated by those two stinger scenes afterwards, where Melina and Natasha are, It's Real to Me with the photo album, and where Alexei, Red Guardian, and Yelena are bonding over the song that he remembered her singing that song.
American Pie.
Decades prior. He remembered that it was an important thing to her. And all of those things are what makes a family real. And regardless of why they were put together or why they're there, it was real to them. That absolutely sings here.
Agreed.
Yeah, in fact, Tony in the live chat. By the way, live listeners, feel free to drop your thoughts in the chat. We'd love to share them on air. He says the heartbreak of Yelena as Natasha was discounting the family unit, where Yelena kind of is real to her. And that was such a great scene. Tony, I absolutely agree with you. And I think this speaks to the wonderfulness that is Florence Pugh. But I mean, a lot of her reactions weren't even just what she was saying, just watching the expressions on her face and the way she carried herself and how that changed throughout the scene. I think is just a bit of a master class in nonverbals, which I think is kind of amazing. So
can you guys, this movie felt like a passing of the torch to some degree, right? Because of what we know happened to Natasha.
And what's that, Jim? Let's spoil a movie.
Yeah. And was it in Endgame or Infinity War? I get them all mixed up.
Endgame,
right? Yeah. In Endgame, the Black Widow is killed, right? In one of the action scenes. And what's his name? What's his name? But
Hawkeye?
Jeremy Renner.
Oh, Hawkeye.
With Hawkeye, right? And she's killed, and we see that come back in the stinger scene at the end of the movie, at the very end of the credits, and we'll talk about that too. But so it seems like, I mean, they brought Florence Pugh in. She's amazing here, I think. At least I think so. And as Yelena, and apparently they must have plans for her because of what we kind of see starting to take shape in that stinger scene. How do you guys feel about that? And like, where is it going to lead us in the comics? Because I don't have an idea. All I know is that someone, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, comes along and says, "Hey, Hawkeye killed your sister. Don't you want to go get her?" or something like that. And which is kind of a weird, clumsy setup to me, because someone else who she trusts more could probably tell her, well, he really didn't kill your sister, but apparently she's going to believe this one lady that comes out of nowhere, and that's going to set off a whole chain of events. It seems like to me, but maybe you guys can talk about that and explain it a little bit.
Well, I do have to say I love Julia Louis-Dreyfus as Valentina, and she did show up already in another Disney Plus show in The Falcon and Winter Soldier, as sort of the fast-talking, somehow well-connected, very wealthy and backed person who recruits the new Captain America to her team. And it seems like she is putting together, or already has put together by the end of Black Widow, a team of some sort, also including Yelena's character, who is not named with a special nickname. Maybe it's Black Widow, maybe it's White Widow, we don't know. But it already seems like they have a a relationship. She already works for Valentina in some capacity. And I think for people who follow the comics, there's some echoes here of a particular superhero-ish team that's been put together.
We can probably keep that team a secret, though.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're not going to say anything about that, but it seems like she's collecting some people already.
So I see a note from Bill Harris who says that she's going to be on the Hawkeye show on Disney Plus.
Yep.
This obviously, the stinger seems to be a setup for that. So is Yelena as Black Widow, White Widow, whatever widow, gonna go kill Jeremy Renner for playing a part in Natasha's death? Is that really where that's going?
I think the idea here is that, what do we normally see here, right? We normally see whenever superheroes meet, they have to fight first, right? So when Hawkeye and Hawkeye, the two Hawkeyes that are going to star on the Hawkeye show, God, the internet's about to get super confusing. Once that happens, but once all of that happens and they're fighting this Yelena character, I'm sure there's going to be some fights, some assassination attempts, and this is just me putting on like the, we've seen how these go hat. At some point, they're going to like stop fighting and figure out that there is someone else pulling some strings and that's going to be the threat of the show. But I'm here for it. I'm here for them putting Florence Pugh in here, getting some more of like, we've seen what happens when Hawkeye and Black Widow are best friends, because they've been best friends since Hawkeye's introduction here. It'll be fun to see what happens when Hawkeye and new Black Widow or whatever are not, and they're at each other's throats. I'm excited to see how this plays.
Yeah,
and the Val character, we have seen her previously in the films?
We were not in the films. We were talking about that. I think we stepped away for a second.
Jordy, our new kitten, just went crazy and disconnected my audio.
Oh no!
We randomly saw like the couch or the chair, and I was just like, "Oh wow, I hope Jim's okay."
The camera spun around. Everything was.
The Val character showed up in the Falcon and Winter Soldier TV series on Disney Plus. Just recently. So, which I'm wondering would have played very differently if Black Widow had come out in May of last year, like when it was originally supposed to. Val would have just been a strange cameo at the end, and that would have been the surprise shock, and then would have had a little bit slightly meatier role in the TV series that I think actually did premiere kind of around when it was supposed to.
Was this movie going to come after Endgame? Always, anyway.
It was always going to come after Endgame, but it was always going to come before the television shows.
Before the
right.
So then we would not have known who this.
This would have been her first appearance, and the second appearance would have been Falcon and Winter
Soldier.
So
it would have been even weirder. Like, even though it was weird to me because I didn't know her, it would have been weird for everybody because nobody would have known who she was, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Because she definitely doesn't introduce herself here, but she's very much fully introduced in Falcon and Winter Soldier.
I see.
Would it have killed them to have one line being like, "I know you've been my handler for the last 5 months," but blah, 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 blah. Whatever. I haven't watched much of Falcon and Winter Soldier yet. I watched the first episode. I don't really care about spoilers that much, but maybe I'll go back and finish it at some point.
You should. It's the goods, especially all of those shows sort of like around episode 4. I think that's just sort of like the new formula for these shows. Like the episode 4, like ramp up. So
yeah. Xander, oh my God, Xander, good to see you, handsome. He says, Mrs. Hydra making the anti-Avengers. Is that the superhero group you were coyly playing?
I can't say anything about that.
Is that because it's comic book knowledge? Is that what you're talking about?
That would be comic book knowledge, for sure.
All right.
But there's and who knows, because again with the the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they take things that they like from different comic book storylines and reuse characters that might be in a slightly different way from how they appear and act in the comics. So this could be something different, but could be, like what some of our commenters are saying.
Yeah, absolutely. We got a comment from D Geek Will saying Dark Avengers or Thunderbolts, and absolutely that was one of my thoughts as well. It feels like Thunderbolts is one of those properties they kind of want to do something with, but they, because of the way that appeared in the comic books, they might need to do something very, 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 very different than that. So borrow the name, but do something more tied to like Dark Avengers or Secret Avengers or what have you. So what we might be seeing is sort of like a mishmash of these things. I don't know. That's the exciting thing. Like, I know, Jim, we talked kind of at the beginning of the show, kind of like about like, how much of this would you get if you're a comic book fan versus not? And the truth of the matter is like, we have some like as a comic book fan, I've got some like names like that I know from some of these different characters, but the actual storylines, we're finding them out kind of at the same time as you like that. Like, they're doing a really good job of like borrowing from the old, but still like introducing like very new adaptations or interpretations of those things.
Yeah, I think there's different levels. I think there's comic book readers and people who have knowledge, like, you Will and Steve and maybe Adrian or even Brad. I don't know. But like, and then there's like folks who maybe don't remember or aren't into the comics, but have watched all of the MCU TV shows, WandaVision and Loki, and are caught up on Falcon and Winter Soldier, neither of which I am, right? So I've been watching some of Loki, which hasn't made a lot of sense to me, but like I've been watching a bit of Loki and I watched WandaVision, but I hadn't seen any of the Falcon and Winter Soldier. So when Julie Louis-Dreyfus shows up, I turn to Brad in the movie theater. I'm like, did we see her in another movie? Like, who is she? Because I don't know what she's doing.
I've got a question for Adrian, because we all kind of like, we fangirled over David Harbour, but just looking at this IMDb cast here, and I've got Scarlett Johansson, Florence Pugh, David Harbour, Rachel Weisz. Was this the best movie ever, Adrian? Just from an aesthetics perspective?
Oh, aesthetics? That's interesting you ask. I think, my friend Janny from Austin, I'd have to consult with her because we've had many conversations about good-looking casts, and that's not limited to male or female. It's kind of everybody. But yeah, it was one stunning cast, and one of the things that Brad and I talked about with David Harbour, I was like, I would drop kick Scarlett Johansson and Florence Pugh to get to David Harbour. So definitely a very good looking cast. And that definitely didn't hurt to have just a visual feast, no matter what you're looking at on screen, whether it's Scarlett Johansson, Florence Pugh, or David Harbour, or Rachel Weisz, who I've always had a soft spot for. So
I had a friend who, it's interesting. I know we've talked, Adrian, but I had a friend who during Pride Month came out as bisexual. And no, I'm talking about something that's not on this show. Actually, it's a third party. But they said that their one of their defining movies of bisexuality was The Mummy, very specifically because of the cast in that, which very famously also stars Rachel Weisz. So,
oh wow,
Rachel Weisz, the bi whisperer.
Yeah.
And on that topic, I just wanted to bring up real quick. During Pride Month last month, I did come out as bisexual, so kind of leads into a fun conversation and the flag and colors I have in the background. So, appreciation of David Harbour is not new to me, but like just having more conversations about it definitely feels cool, and I appreciate that the opportunity to talk about that here for sure.
So if I'm gonna do some quick like calculus here and tell me if I'm following all this right. So the way Red Guardian sees himself is sort of as like Rush's version of Captain America, right? Right. So that's the case. We got to see a scene where we commented on America's ass in Captain America. How come we don't have a Russia's ass scene with Red Guardian?
Oh, that's a good
Right?
question.
I want to
Russia's
see
ass.
Russia's ass. That would be amazing.
Brad's back. with
Deleted
Russia's
scene?
ass.
Deleted scene, maybe?
If they, gosh,
The
if they
Blu-ray
didn't,
extras?
if they didn't film that as a deleted scene, they missed an opportunity, because that would have been like, even if you're not like, I mean, just as obviously thirsty for David Harbour as this entire cast is, apparently, that would still be a very funny scene to watch too. So like,
I'm just gonna say I will be watching the director's uncut. Okay.
yeah.
Oh goodness. Well, I had some technical difficulties. I'm back. It sounds like you guys didn't miss a beat, which is awesome. Have we talked about the possibility of Natasha coming back? Is that ever going to happen?
I really thought I was going to see her in that post-credit scene. I know probably nobody else did, but I really thought Shield just going to pop out of the woods, especially, and they teased it a little, right? They definitely teased it with the whistle thing that they did, like, and I'm like, oh, here she comes. Nope. They subverted my expectation.
Yeah.
So, yeah, instead we get some other character I didn't know. That was a little bit of a letdown.
Yeah. I don't know if we're going to see her back, or at least not back in a present role, maybe in some flashback scenes that they might film. But I mean, it seems like in this new phase, Marvel's making the choice, and Kevin Feige actually just mentioned that they're not doing the 9, 10, 11 film contracts with their actors anymore. So this might be an opportunity for them to pass the torch in a very, on the nose kind of way by saying, well, Natasha's completely dead, but guess what? We've got Yelena to take her place, and she's really cool, and she's got some great quips, and is Florence Pugh. So
I mean, I would 100% be okay with that, as long as she continues to mimic her sister's poses and be grossed out of herself.
Yes.
Oh, one of my favorite parts of the movie. She jumps down out of the grate and just lands that Black Widow pose, looks up and goes, ugh. And she had some of the best lines in this entire film.
Oh, she did.
Say. Some of her quips and her asides were just comedy gold.
I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see Scarlett Johansson again, but if she still has a role. Like, she was an executive producer on this film, and one of the things like Kevin Feige was saying in one of the interviews I watched from him was that when they were first sort of like crafting like what a Black Widow movie is going to be and how that's going to look, Scarlett Johansson was one of the big ones who was pushing for it being, instead of like just a straight up solo movie, making it more of like an ensemble and really building that and helping to develop up other people. So I wouldn't be surprised if we still see her executive producing some things or being involved, even if she's not on camera anymore. And to that, I'm super cool with that.
Well, I did see a trailer for a movie called What If, right, where they bend the timelines and fuck around with all these outcomes that we've seen, right? So, I mean, it's not out of the possibility that they could bring her back, right? In that movie.
But what if it's going to be a show? It's going to be a Disney Plus show. Yeah. It's their first animated show, and like in the comics, What If was just sort of like, instead of it being like, let's play with timelines to sort of like merge them into one story, they're just sort of like, like when you have little branching storyline, it just sort of says, what if Captain America was a duck? Let's just do a whole issue of that. And seriously, that one exists somewhere, I'm sure. So I think that's what we're going to see in What If. I think those are just going to be more like kind of weird imagining stories, not ones that are necessarily designed to sort of like backdoor someone back in, unless we're backdooring Ray Winstone, according to chat.
I was going to say, speaking of an ensemble cast, Bill Z says, Harbour's getting all the bear love, but I do whatever Ray Winstone commanded me to do, and he wouldn't need to bother with the friggin' pheromones. He's a pretty sexy motherfucker too. I mean, he's evil as all get out in this film.
Of course, he gets the most problematic role we've seen in a long time, right? From a villain, right? It's pretty brutal what kind of the things obviously he's done to create this this Red Room, and what he's done to these women, and just some pretty evil stuff. Even some of it implied, but some of it actually on camera as well.
Yeah.
I mean, he's basically what would happen if Harvey Weinstein continued down the path and there wasn't a Me Too movement. Like, basically, he is the Harvey Weinstein of the MCU. But with spies and assassins rather than film roles at Miramax.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's very, very, very icky and cringy. Some of these scenes where, especially where he was getting violent and abusive toward some of those characters. It just felt too, really gross.
Welcome to Marvel villains. Speaking of villains, did you all talk about Taskmaster at all while I was on my...
We have not talked about Taskmaster
not at all.
All right, so I will just say, obviously, we have a comic expert from a comic podcast on board with us. We have Will, who has lots of knowledge. Adrian, you have a tremendous amount of knowledge about things. I'm wondering, what did we think of this version of Taskmaster? Because I've only seen Taskmaster in the Spider-Man PS4/PS5 games. I really loved the character in those games, but this seems to be a different version of the character than we got there. So were you pleased? Were you not pleased? What did you think?
I'm just going to start out the easy one. This is the only Taskmaster I ever have seen. So she was fine. I liked her character. I liked that she was it was a surprise reveal. I don't know if you guys probably already knew who it was way before the reveal. I enjoyed her character.
I was pleasantly surprised because this is a very different Taskmaster than the Taskmaster from the comics. So I was very much surprised. And of course it was basically right up to the point of the reveal. I was like, wait a minute, they're not going to. Oh, they did. And I thought it was very clever of them to do that. And also, it also just shows how Ray Winstone's character was even more vile of a human being than he came across. So I think it was it fit very well with how they were characterizing him as a villain, and it also tied up some of those loose ends in Natasha's backstory that was revealed here in this movie as how she got out of the Red Room to begin with, and it kind of brought it all back to that moment, and then of course sort of the forgiveness moment that happened later on towards the end of the film too was also again tied it all very well together. And I think it actually didn't do it in too much of a predictable way. It wasn't really didn't see it coming until the reveal happened. So
I think there are going to be some comic book fans who are thrown off in a negative way, and I think that's just because this is a very radically different character than what is in the comics. In the comics, he is first of all, it's a guy who speaks. He is like the guy who like trains henchmen, and he has this like perfect memory and can like study any move. This is a very different character. I think this works so well here because what we got here is Natasha had to reckon with two things in this movie. She had to reckon with this family. Was it real? Was it not? Because of what we shared. And we talked about it. She has to reckon with the red that's in her ledger. Well, the biggest red splotch in that ledger is when she crossed the biggest line possible, which was she in the assassination attempt on Dreykov. She was willing to take Antonia, who ends up being Taskmaster, as collateral damage. And that's what ends up having to fight her. And I love that because it changes the entire end sequence of the movie. This unstoppable killing machine that is stalking Natasha this entire movie and is just kicking her ass every time she shows up. The fight sequences at the end changes the dynamics to where Taskmaster is trying to kill Natasha and Natasha is trying to save Taskmaster as everything's falling apart. That more than like any explosion or whatever, the fact that they were fighting two separate fights at the exact same time is what made that final climax just so like effective to me.
Yeah.
Adrian, how about for you? Did that work as well for you?
Oh yeah, big time. I really appreciated Natasha's opportunity to have to right her wrongs from the past as best she could, yeah, the battle, them fighting two different kind of fights. I really, really appreciated that. And now Taskmaster has free will, right? And I'm curious to see where that goes in the future, along with the other widows. And I'm really, really excited for that. Whatever's in the future for them, because the entire time they've been enslaved by this disgusting human, and now they've got their freedom, and I really want to see what they do with that, with the skills that they have. So I really hope we see more from this particular group, and female-led action Marvel films, I think, is a big victory for everybody.
Yeah, definitely a different wrinkle with Will that you brought up, and Adrian, you talked about with, their motivations during that. There's always a climactic fight scene, but this one had that different wrinkle that made it just much more than just, bashing, bad against good kind of thing. It was, like you said, Natasha's like kind of battling with her guilt about what happened to that character earlier and that she was a part of. And I think she's trying to, as Adrian said, right that wrong if she can. And it was interesting to see that dynamic.
Over in chat, Steve Sosa says, did anyone else think it was going to be her real mom? And interestingly enough, I didn't have it clocked as going to be Antonia until we physically see it. If anything, I think one of the things the movie did a really good job of is creating a small cast of potential people that it could have been, so that you could have followed any of those threads. I've heard a lot of people, and I think I was probably into this camp more than the others, like that was also thinking like it could be Mason, the guy that was like helping Natasha through these scenes, like that could have been there as well. And I really liked the fact that like up until that, like by giving us some plausible suspects, it was able to hide like the identity of Antonia, like kind of like in plain sight.
I just loved when Taskmaster busted out the Black Panther moves. I was like, oh, fuck.
Yeah.
I gotta ask, what was the purpose of the character who was with Natasha in living with her in the woods in the trailer near the beginning of the movie? What was the purpose of that character? I wasn't quite getting that.
I don't know the history, but wasn't he just her like go-to supplier for like weapons and planes? And
yeah. He basically he was her one-stop shop,
like a handler
for spy stuff. I think basically, she could go to him if she needed guns. Yeah, she was. Walmart
gun mart.
It kind of hinted at more than that, though, right? It hinted a little bit. It may be more than that. Like maybe there was some. At least a friendship, if not something a little bit more.
And what I think was so cool about that is what it hinted at to me was more that like it was almost like the absence of a friendship, which I think is important for the story, because this was the character who Natasha was like the person Natasha was closest to and sharing all these thoughts with was not her family that she made when she was young, not her newfound family of the Avengers. It was the guy that she was buying like guns and generators from. And I think to me, what that showcased was just how far she had gotten away from sort of like this core thing that she needed in her life, which is get her families back.
Yeah. And when Taskmaster showed up at that part of the film early on, did you guys know that it was Taskmaster right away? Or did they... I don't remember if they called that character out by name at all yet at that point.
I don't know if they did, but they did actually show Taskmaster earlier without the hood. It was basically it was at the Red Room, before everything, where basically he was getting a chip in the back of the
that's
head.
right. That's right. Yeah.
And also the character, in all the promotional materials, at least, has been pretty much named as Taskmaster, even though I don't think they actually said Taskmaster until about halfway through the movie.
Right, right. And
Steve, this was unintentional, Steve, but now I want to see a villain named Taskmaster. Can that be
Taskmaster? Well,
a much more boring movie.
That's the real
I don't have any of your 1099s. Yeah, I just
Giving all the accountants out there semis.
You can't. You can't claim this as an office expense.
Show me that big, thick ledger.
I want to see all your receipts. I don't think that would be a very popular film.
So we've got an interesting question from Steve in the chat. And by the way, hey, Steve, you snuck in while I was having some technical difficulties. Steve says, do you guys think that the end credits scene is the original one they wanted for the movie? Feels like the scene makes more sense after FATWS. Which is Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
It definitely does make more sense after that, if you've seen it.
Yes and no. And in fact, if they did intend that to be the original end sequence, we would have seen that well before Falcon and Winter Soldier premiered. So we would have gotten this quick introduction to Julie Louis-Dreyfus without any context, with no idea who she really was portraying, more or less. Mm-hmm. It would have been just a very, who is this? What is she doing? Oh my gosh, that's Julie Louis-Dreyfus. What is she doing in this?
And that's why I think it was the original intended one, as because if like what they really wanted to do was to introduce a character and have people kind of like guessing who it was and what it meant, which with that short of a scene would have played better than if she already introduced herself by name and had like a longer conversational scene with John Walker, as she later does. Plus, the not naming of him is very intentional, and it feels like they were really trying to like sort of like hold a mirror up to like what happened with like the first like Samuel L. Jackson like Nick Fury like cameo.
Yeah, who is this guy? Why is he in my living room? What is this initiative? Yeah,
right. Well, fellas, any final thoughts on Black Widow before we look to wrap up here in a little while?
Yeah, I just think in general, I really like the movie, even though I'm not, I didn't understand all the moving parts and how they all kind of fit together at the end. I thought, as a standalone movie, I thought it was really good. It kept my attention the whole time. There was a lot of action scenes in here. Usually that's when I kind of fade off a little bit because the action seems to get a little clunky and cameras moving all around, and it's not, I don't know. It doesn't really, it doesn't really speak to the characters all that much. But I think this was a really good movie, like as a standalone, action Marvel movie. Even if you're not, don't know all the characters and how they connect.
I've got a closing thought. I just wish this movie came out like 5 years ago or however long ago. Infinity War came out, because it would have made Black Widow's death that much more impactful, and it was just really cool to watch Sarah's reactions. Sarah's my wife, and just watching her enjoy a female-led action movie was really cool. And we had some cool conversations afterwards, and she was like, I can't believe they talked about her uterus in the movie. She was like, that was really important. Like, that was really cool for them to have that conversation in a predominantly franchise that's targeted towards males. That was really important for her. So I don't want to say too little too late. I would never ever say that about this movie, but we really need more like this 5 years ago. But let's move forward and make more movies like this for my wife and for my nieces. Who will connect with this in a way that I can't, because I'm cis male. So,
and I think we're in a position where we can finally start to see that too. One of the big holdups was apparently Ike Perlmutter, who was the old architect of Marvel, and he before Feige was able to take more ownership and control over all of that, Perlmutter was actively saying no to Captain Marvel, no to Black Panther, no to Black Widow. You can see what these things have in common. But it looks like they've they've been able to shift leadership over to the people who are more interested in telling these types of stories. We didn't mention it, but not only that, but this was for something that was not just a female-centric story, but one about violence that's perpetrated upon females by a terrible male-led system, as was what we got in here. I'm glad that we had a female director telling the story, and I think that that care really showed in the way that they told this story.
Yeah, I'm just going to basically repeat what you two said because you both said it so well. This movie should have come out several years ago, and in fact, that is my biggest criticism about it, is that it took us so long to have the long teased Black Widow solo film. And even though this isn't technically a solo film, there is a little bit more of an ensemble with the supporting cast here. This was her focal film. And we had to go through every other solo introduction film, including Captain Marvel. Even though, Black Widow had been introduced as early as the second Iron Man. So the second or third movie, depending on where you put the Incredible Hulk. She's been with the MCU since almost the very beginning, and yet has never really had a solo outing where every other major player has. So the line where Florence Pugh says, Yelena says, one of the big ones is going to come and save you if you ever are in trouble. And she's like, what do you mean one of the big ones? It's like, the god of space doesn't really need to take an ibuprofen when he gets into a fight. But really, it's more of, of the fact that she really hasn't gotten, her center stage moment until this film. And it didn't happen until after her character had more or less been killed off. So sad.
Yeah.
That's sad. But that being said, the action was great. The feels were good. I love the actors in this just had a wonderful rapport with each other that made you understand this family dynamic that's very much unlike most other family dynamics on screen. So very enjoyable, but sadly so many years after it should have been.
Definitely get where you're coming from there. And I enjoyed this movie so much. It's probably the best Marvel thing I've seen in the last 5 years, including the 2 Avengers movies. I liked that it was a smaller story. I liked that it was more self-contained. Same thing. I wish it had come actually between those films if we hadn't gotten an introductory film earlier on. It really took me out of this movie a lot because I knew that she was alive so that she could die after the events of this movie took place, right? Can you imagine what it would be like if she disappeared in the explosion or whatever of Red Room and you don't know if she's alive or dead, and then she, is just gone? Oh God, that'd be powerful. But whatever. We didn't get that movie. I know. Tears, all the tears. Hey, I want to say hi to Sarah Charlie real quick. She says, "Oh hi, Sarah. So good to see you. You're
oh
good
hi.
people."
Oh.
Thanks for letting me borrow Adrian for a couple hours, Sarah. So good to see you.
We'll give him back in just a few.
And Eric is here too. Hey, Eric, good to see you. It's been a hot minute, my friend. He says, "Hey, Bears." Hey, Eric, good to see you, friend. Well, folks, why don't we do this? We've got just a few minutes left. Normally we would do plugs, but there's a whole fuck ton of us. So why don't instead we give Adrian and Steve a chance to plug their shows, and we can just let everyone know where to find us online if they want to chat. Adrian, let's start with you. Tell us briefly about your show, how our listeners can find you, and interact if they want to.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. I'm on I co-host a movie podcast called The Green Screen of Death. We're just starting to get back into recording again. The whole pandemic really wiped out our preferred method of recording. So we recorded an episode last month. We're really excited to get back into the studio, so to speak, and put out some more movie podcasts. So you can find us there. And I also stream on Twitch. I'm The Crow Show on Twitch. I stream 2-3 times a week. And I love entertaining.
And you're so good at it too.
And you've been working on that voice. We can tell. You've been working on that voice, man.
I have. Yeah, I do a little bit of voice acting here and there. And,
I'm waiting for that.
Few
I'm waiting for
projects.
that one. I'm waiting for that one show or commercial where I hear the voice and I'm like, "Oh my god, I know that guy."
I can send you a link to one that I did that's like part of a Kickstarter. It's pretty. I'm really proud of that one. It is pretty cool.
Oh yeah, definitly send that.
Please do. We'd love to check that out for sure.
Absolutely.
Well, Green Screen to Death podcast, such a great show. Please check it out. Jim will include some links in the show notes as he normally does for those of you who are listening on digital tape delay via iTunes, Spotify, whatever. You can find those links there. Steve Mowry, tell us a little bit about your show and how folks can interact with you.
As my name here says, for those of you watching, I am with the Comic Book Bears podcast. You can find us on Facebook at Comic Book Bears Podcast. And also you can listen to us through Apple Podcasts, through Stitcher. We put out a show about once a week. And actually, since the start of the pandemic, we have been streaming a live show, usually on Thursdays through Facebook Live or on our YouTube channel, Comic Book Bears. If you want to interact with us as well, we do appreciate people in the chat. Otherwise, you can listen to our audio versions, which usually come out a week or two after the live show. But if you want to interact with us, so always send us an email at comicbookbears@gmail.com or at Comic Book Bears on Twitter or Tumblr, or like and subscribe our YouTube channel or follow us on Facebook. So, or you can reach me at on Facebook as well, or at one of many Steves.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Love the Comic Book Bears podcast so much. Thanks again for, loaning Steve out to us, Bill Z, if you're still out there. We appreciate that. Jim, where can people find and interact with you?
Yeah, you guys all know me. You can find me on Twitter at JJP Out West. Those are my initials, JJP, and the words Out West all together. And find me on Facebook under my name, Jim Pugliafico. That's where I am.
All right. Excellent. Thanks so much, sweetheart. Will, how about you?
Of course, you can find me on Twitter. I'm at Whatever Cove. You can find me on Facebook. Just look for William Lindis. You can find me on letterboxd.com. Just look for William Lindis there. I rank and review films there, so give me a follow if you care to see those things.
All right. Excellent. Jim, why are you showing us your crotch?
No, sorry, I'm not.
And you can find Jim's dick
Camera
right here.
The camera slipped off. The camera slipped off again. Thanks, Jordy.
What are you trying to plug?
Oh goodness.
Oh my God.
You're making me blush. Stop.
Thanks so much, Will. Appreciate that. Folks, you can find me on Facebook. Just search for Brad Harris. I'm the one likely with Bear, Chubb, Chaser friends in common with you. You could also find me on Twitter and Letterboxd at iBradPro, like iPad Pro, but iBradPro. It was the most clever Twitter handle I could come up with. We're going to take next week off. We usually do a weekly show, but Jim and I are going camping. Will's got some travel coming up, so we're going to take next week off. We'll be back for a double feature of Space Jam and Old. I don't know how those two movies are going to go together, but we're gonna make them go together. Like, I don't know, honey and peanut butter. It'll work out somehow, right? Maybe we'll see.
Yeah. You have to be old to remember Looney Tunes. So there you go.
Yeah, I can't wait to get into that conversation. We're going to have to hear from some of the moms out there in listener land. Do kids still watch Looney Tunes? Is that still a thing they watch? This is where we need Mary Kay Meadows to pop in and let us know what her kids are doing.
Mary, pop in. Get it?
All right. Folks, thanks so much for hanging out with us. It's been an absolute pleasure. Don't forget, you can access our back catalog of episodes at moviebearspodcast.com. You can find our show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you access your podcasts. We're haunting you like a ghost, basically. So you're welcome. But we will see you all next time. Take care, everybody. Be safe. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
Bye.